Hello students, welcome to the lecture series on International Economic Organization Part 1. This is the topic for today and this is a series on international business. I am Professor Soma Sen Gupta, Kamla Nehru College, University of Delhi. So in this lecture, we will discuss the following topics: General Agreements on Tariff and Trade, which is popularly known as GATT, World Trade Organization WTO, its objectives, role, and the basic trading principles of WTO. Beginning with GATT, that is General Agreements on Tariffs and Trade. Now, during the Great Depression of 1930s, when the Western world was suffering from recessionary conditions, countries adopted a protectionist approach. That means they put restriction on different imports and they though promoted export, but imports were not allowed. And it imposed trade restrictions to safeguard their economies. So then it was necessary for the economies to go for protectionist approach. But in 1945, talks began to reduce trade tariffs, and by the end of the Second World War, the momentum of trade liberalization geared up. Now the economies realized that with more and more trade, each of the economies can gain out of it. So GATT, the predecessor of WTO, it was formed after the Second World War, can be considered as a multilateral agreement between the member nations. So after the Second World War, US and its allies formed three bodies under the Bretton system or Bretton Woods system, because the treaty was signed in Bretton Woods, and that's why it is known as Bretton system, and three bodies were formed. So one is International Monetary Fund, IMF, World Bank, and then General Agreements on Tariffs and Trade, that is GATT. So we will discuss this third body first and the new form of GATT, which is WTO, in this lecture. General Agreements on Tariffs and Trade, which is popularly known as GATT, is a group of 23 countries at Geneva negotiated on tariff related trade rules, and GATT was finally born on 30th October 1947. It was referred as International Trade Organization then, and it had the basic goal as governance of international trade and trade liberalization. Now, as we have discussed that before this GATT agreement, which was signed in 1947, now the economies, most of the economies were having a protectionist measure, and that's why trade was suffering. So, with the formation of GATT, it gave a boost to international trade and trade liberalization happened. Now, there are certain principles which are adopted by GATT, and we have discussed these principles in one of the lectures of international business, where we have discussed how international business works. So, basically that is an outcome of these principles which were adopted by GATT. So, the basic concept that underlie the GATT rules were non-discriminatory. So, between the member nations, each of the nation will be non-discriminatory in two terms, that is most favored nation and national treatment. So, these are the three agreements which were signed under the non-discriminatory principle. So, most favored nation, when we talk about that, all members of GATT should comply with the idea of most favored nations to all imports and exports. So, in this case, what will happen? Each of the country will work with another country in such terms as if that country is under this most favored nation agreement. So, this implies that country A cannot promote or restrict imports from country B if it does not do so for country C. So, if it is giving most favored nation to one of the member country, it has to give it to all the other countries. Then another principle is national treatment. So, all members must treat each other equally and no member should discriminate among other members of GATT in the conduct of international trade. So, as we give preference to domestically produced products, what the GATT members will do, they will consider products produced in any of the member nation as their domestic product. So, that means you are giving national treatment to products produced by all the member nations. So, there is no special national treatment given to one of the nation or your own domestic organization. It is uniformly the national treatment is given to all the member nations and the products produced by all the member nations. In the domestic market, foreign goods and services should not be treated less favorably than the local produce. So, it is going away from the protectionist measure totally. That means you are not giving any kind of protection to your domestic product. You are treating your home produced product as well as the foreign goods and services which are produced in any of the member nation equally. So, you are not being less favorable to the foreign goods and products, especially from the member nations. Now, general agreements on tariffs and trade, that is GATT, it swiftly moved towards World Trade Organization WTO, and we will discuss that how GATT became WTO in this section of the lecture. Now, you know that 8 rounds of negotiation took place among the participating members of the GATT since its formation till 1994, and this we have discussed in the first lecture of international business, how international business worked. So, 8 rounds of negotiation took place regarding different agreements, different products, and then the major focus of the first 6 rounds was on tariff reduction. So, first 6 rounds of those 8 negotiations which happened under GATT talked about tariff reduction, and the 7th round dealt with the removal of non-tariff barriers. The 8th round is very important, which is also known as Uruguay round, and it was a transition round, and that led to the emergence of World Trade Organization WTO. So, GATT switched to WTO. GATT was just a provisional arrangement among the participating members, but WTO is a stronger forum as it was established as a formal international organization with effect from January 1, 1995. So, under the umbrella of WTO, not only rules and provisions relating to trade in goods are dealt with, but it even caters to rules relating to trade in services, foreign investments, intellectual property rights, etc. So, it is wider if we compare GATT and WTO. WTO is wider than GATT because GATT only talked about tariff and non-tariff barriers on trading in goods, but now we are under WTO came the rules relating to trade in services, foreign investment, intellectual property rights mainly, and any other matter there too regarding the international trade. Now, let us talk more about WTO now, World Trade Organization. So, the World Trade Organization is the only global international organization engaged with the rules of trade between the nations. WTO works as a forum of for trade liberalization and trade dispute settlement among member nations. So, it is not only about trade liberalization, that is trade in goods, services, intellectual property rights and financial investment, but it also helps in settlement of trade disputes. So, WTO was formed and it has its head office in Geneva, Switzerland. Slowly many countries joined WTO as member countries. At present, the World Trade Organization has 166 member countries, and this account for 98% of the world trade, and 22 more countries currently are negotiating membership of WTO. So, it is a big forum and covering 98% of the world trade. At its heart are the WTO agreements negotiated and signed by the bulk of world's trading nations and substantiate in their parliaments. So, we will see how WTO agreements works, and when we will be discussing the overview of WTO agreements, and it is regarding not only goods, services, international intellectual property rights or financial investment, but it also talks about dispute settlement in case of any kind of international discord between the countries. The motive is to assist producers of goods and services, exporters and importers organize their business. WTO ensures trade liberalization among the member nations. Now, coming to the objectives of WTO, the first objective is of course promotion of world trade so as to benefit each country. So, when there will be more and more unrestricted trade between the member nations, so each of the member nation will gain out of it. So, that was the first and foremost objective of WTO. Implementation of the new world trade system with of course lesser tariff and non-tariff barriers. Raising competitiveness, that means the best will survive, the best products will be available to the consumers and more choices will be there to the consumers. Faster economic growth through free trade. When there will be free trade, then each of the economy will grow, which are the member nations of WTO. Breaking hurdles to an open world trading system. So, without barriers, a trading system should be there throughout the world, and that was the objective of WTO. Enhancement of production, productivity levels, employment levels. So, this could be possible through this kind of liberalized trade between the member nations. Expansion and optimum utilization of world resources. So, the resources of the world will be best channelized if there is free trade. So, that was another objective of WTO. Improvement of the level of living of world population. So, irrespective of whether it is a developed country or underdeveloped or developing countries, the standard of living of world population should enhance, and that was another objective of WTO. Ensuring that developing countries are able to secure a better balance in the sharing of benefits of foreign trade. So, before the formation of WTO, the developed countries were becoming more developed because they were always at upper hand. Many of the countries were their colonies, and they plundered the resources of those countries, but have not given back anything to them. So, in that arena, the developing and underdeveloped countries, they lost out in international trade. Their products could not survive in the market, and the raw materials were purchased by these developed countries, and the developing countries and underdeveloped countries were at a disadvantage. Now, after the formation of WTO, it was ensured that the developing countries are able to secure a better balance and share the benefits of foreign trade. Now, coming to the role of WTO. So, when the organization of this big size with membership of 166 countries, then naturally the role multiplied over the years of WTO. That is providing a framework and facilitating the implementation, administration of multilateral trade agreements between the member nations. All agreements or multilateral trade agreements form WTO. Therefore, Multilateral trade agreements are the heart of WTO. So, multilateral, whenever we talk about it, it is like many countries agreeing to trade agreements. So, all the member nations, when they agree to the trade agreements, we call it multilateral trade agreements. WTO acts as a forum for negotiation of multilateral trade agreement among the member nations. So, you can negotiate and come to a consensus between the member nations under the umbrella of WTO. It administers the procedure for resolving trade disputes. As we said, that it is not only about liberalization of trade. Many a times trade disputes happen between different nations. So, WTO administers the procedure for resolving those disputes. In order to support global economic policy, WTO acts in cooperation with other bodies like International Monetary Fund, International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which became World Bank later on, and its affiliated agencies. Now, basic trading principles of WTO, the different agreements became principles of trading in WTO, and as we have discussed under GATT, the basic principles of most favored nation and national treatment, that philosophy was carried on in WTO as well. So, WTO has a framework of policies binding to all member nations. The trading principles aim to encourage free movement of goods and services among member nations. So, when we will discuss these trading principles, you will find how it encourages free movement of goods and services among the member nations, or how the trade was liberalized because of these principles. So, if we enumerate these basic trading principles, they are non-discriminatory principle, which was adopted from GATT, and this is also known as trade without discrimination. So, we have discussed them, that these principle under GATT as well: most favored nation treatment, national treatment. Then the second principle is freer trade. Third is promoting fair competition. Fourth is predictability through binding and transparency. Fifth is encouraging social development and economic reforms. So, we will discuss these principles one by one. Non-discriminatory principle or trade without discrimination, as I said, we have discussed it under GATT, and there is now that was adopted by WTO, and here there is a repetition of that only. So, countries under WTO are not entitled to discriminate between their global trading partners. Non-discrimination covers two major elements, as we have discussed under GATT also: the most favored nation, which is popularly known as MFN, and the national treatment principle. When we talk about non-discriminatory principle, we find these two principles, they ensure that trading is conducted without discrimination. Both the principles are part of WTO rules on goods, services and intellectual property rights, but with different limitations and scope, which we will discuss when we will be discussing the rules regarding trade in goods, services and intellectual property rights. Now, when we talk about most favored nation treatment under non-discrimination principle, so it is, as you are now aware, that all members of WTO are granted the status of most favored nation. So, you are not going to discriminate between country A, B, C, D or any country which are member nations of WTO. You will consider each one of them as your most favored nation and without any discrimination with other nations. Hence, the member nation shall not differentiate between the trading partners. And who are these trading partners? They are the member nations of WTO. So, for you, all the member nations are equal. So, you are not giving any privilege to any one of them and not giving it to any other. All members of WTO must be considered the same. MFN implies each time a member nation lowers the trade barriers to other member, it needs to stretch the benefit to all trading partners. So, you cannot discriminate while giving benefits or lowering trade barriers on non-tariff barriers or tariff barriers. If you are providing it to one nation, you have to provide it to all the member nations. MFN is the fundamental standard of WTO, but it has certain exceptions like granting greater market access to developing economies. Also setting of a free trade agreement which covers only specific goods, and members can have discrimination against other goods. Then the second principle under non-discrimination principle is national treatment. As I said, there will be no discrimination between the locally produced goods and the goods produced in any of the member nations. So, locals and foreigners are to be treated equally, and here we are talking about only the member nation countries. So, almost all the countries are members of WTO now, like 166 countries. So, you will treat all other 165 countries, if you are one of the nation, equally along with your own domestically produced goods. So, national treatment implies imported products to be considered at par with domestic products. So, no special national treatment is given to your domestic product, it is like national treatment to all goods irrespective of in which of the member nation it is produced or whether it is produced in your own country. It takes care that none of the member nation can levy higher domestic tariff on imported like and competitive products. So, what is like and competitive product? A like product is one which has similar properties, nature, quality, end user, similar consumer taste and preferences. So, for like product produce in any of the country or domestically produce, you will give a national treatment or you will not discriminate between the products. Now, MFN and national treatment, if we compare the two sub principles of non-discrimination, we find that MFN ensures equal treatment for products offered among WTO members, and MFN looks more towards at the broader non-discrimination treatment. But when we talk about national treatment ensures equal consideration between imported and domestic goods, and it is more towards inside border non-discrimination. So, that is extensive border non-discrimination when we talk about MFN, here it is inside border non-discrimination. The second major principle of trading principle of WTO is freer trade. Of course, we are talking about liberalization. So, WTO has removed some trade barriers to popularize trade liberalization. Trading partners are needed to be more concerned about issues relating to exchange rate policies, red tapeism which may be there in some of the member nations like in South Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, we have red tapeism, and that is one of the issue, but otherwise there will be no restriction. The major aspects covered to promote free trade among member nations are lowering trade barriers, reduction or even removal in tariff rates and custom duties, lowering of quotas that restrict specific quantities, removal of import bans. The idea is to open markets through progressive liberalization and materializes trading plans more efficiently among the trading partners. Then the third principle is promoting fair competition. WTO trading principles are meant to promote competition in the global market and facilitate fair and undisturbed market competition. WTO has allowed reduction in the tariff, but member nations have right to levy countervailing duties on imports that have been subsidized and anti-dumping duties on imports that have been dumped. So, some relaxation is given for levying countervailing duties and on imports or that have been subsidized and anti-dumping duties. Then the another principle is predictability through binding and transparency. So, WTO members are required to bind their commitments to trading partners. No secret arrangements should happen between the member nations. This binding leads to sealing of tariff and promise not to rise or alter the trade barriers. This gives market a clear picture of future opportunities which encourages investment, trade, jobs and brings more stability, transparency and predictability. Promising not to increase tariffs is called binding a tariff. Binding leads to greater certainty for business, which in turn leads to predictability. And the last principle is encouraging social development and economic reforms. WTO principles are structured in a manner that supports economic reforms and social development in all the member nations, irrespective of whether it is a developed, developing or underdeveloped country. Not less than 3/4 of WTO members are developing countries. So, there is a bias towards developing countries, which we will discuss when we will be discussing the limitations of WTO, but they are trying hard to remove. When we talk about developed nations, there is this bias, but now they are talking more of developing countries. So, 3/4 of the WTO members are now developing countries. So, all the agreements are now taking place, keeping in mind the benefit to developing countries. WTO constantly comes up with reforms like special assistance and flexibility in time of implementation of WTO agreements, increasing bindings on developed countries. The aim is to bring developing nations at par with global trading markets. Now, let us summarize what we have discussed, that at the end of the Second World War, a group of 23 countries at Geneva negotiated on tariff related trade rules, and General Agreements on Tariff and Trade GATT was born on 30th October 1947 with the goal of governance of international trade and trade liberalization. The 8th round, Uruguay round of GATT was a transition round and led to the emergence of WTO. WTO was established as a formal international organization with effect from January 1, 1995. It covers rules and provisions relating to trade in goods, services, foreign investments, intellectual property rights, etc. WTO has its head office in Geneva, Switzerland, and at present has 166 member countries. The basic trading principles of WTO are non-discrimination principle, which has two sub-principles like most favored nation and national treatment. Then other principles are freer trade, fair competition, predictability through transparency and encouraging social development and economic reforms. So, these are certain references for you. I have added a EPG Pathshala as well, C.B. Gupta, Sumati Verma, Chaturvedi and others, Hill and Hult. These are the basic books which I have referred to for this lecture, and you can also go through them. Thank you students. Hope you have learnt a lot about WTO in this lecture.